Take it away.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone, Senator Morrison, Chairman Morrison, and then to the committee members, as well as the staff administration who are here today. Welcome to the Joint Committee meeting on transportation. And it's so good to see each of you today as we focus on my favorite topic and topic that I know more about now than I've ever known. And that is certainly transportation. And I've even got my little 7-year-old granddaughter talking about transportation as she has gone from doing Christmas to wanting a bike, to riding a train, to wanting a drone. And now I just want to ride on an airplane. And so everybody's talking about transportation. But we thank you again. Senator Morrison and I thought it would be helpful for us to have an opportunity to get updates and information concerning transportation legislation for the upcoming session. We already know it's going to be a fast-paced and virtual, and so we wanted to be sure that we're literally ready to roll in January. We have an impressive and committed team of individuals in Virginia, as many of you know, who work hard to deliver a transportation system that we can be proud of. The leadership from Governor Northam and Secretary Valentine and the Deputy Secretary, as well as others, are all working hard as employees in the Department of Transportation, and they are to be commended. They have worked diligently and during the period, most of these unprecedented times, and efforts to keep it rolling, to keep it moving. And we are grateful for their work, their diligence, and their commitment to Virginia. As you might know, and Virginia is on the cutting edge of innovation and efficient transportation system. As we move forward, we still have many challenges that we are facing, but also opportunities to make improvement in the lives of so many of Virginians. And as chair of the House Committee on Transportation, my focus, and again, and I've shared this many times, that there is such a need to look at the delivery of services and in a way that is equitable, is efficient, and environmentally safe. And so as we continue to move forward, we are establishing a world-class transportation system. People are recognizing Virginia for the work that's being done. But again, as always, there's room for improvement and other things that we need to look at. And I'm hoping that we will have an opportunity again today to do some of that, but not only today, but as we move forward, as it relates to the Transportation Committee and the transportation system, that we are inclusive of all of Virginians and making sure that the services are delivered to them, enhancing their quality of life in a most profound way. So thank you again for allowing me this opportunity, and we are ready to, and I turn it over this time to Senator Morrison so that we could move forward with the meeting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, my good friend. And welcome, everyone. Why don't we get roll call out of the way here before I make just a couple of comments, and then we'll get on with Secretary Valentine. So staff, could you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Senator Newman. I believe I just saw him come in via phone, so I'll give him a second to unmute. Just moving down the list, Senator Favola.
I apologize. Here.
Senator Cosgrove. Senator DeSteff.
Here.
Senator Suterlane. Senator McClellan.
Yeah, I think that's...
Oh, is it Senator Suterlane? Senator McClellan. Senator Peake.
Here.
Senator Boysko.
Here.
Senator Obenshain. Senator Eben.
Here.
Senator Surville.
Here.
Senator McPike.
Here.
Senator Sproul.
Here.
Senator Pillion. Senator Marsden.
Here.
All right, and I'll turn it over to my colleague in the House Clerk's office.
You. Madam Chair, Delegate McQuinn.
Here.
Present. Delegate Murphy,
Here.
Delegate Watts,
Here.
Delegate Ward, Delegate Carr,
Here.
Delegate Bagby, Delegate Hurst,
Here.
Delegate Jones,
Here.
Delegate Delaney,
Here.
Delegate Lee, excuse me, Delegate Carter, Delegate Reed,
Present.
Delegate Rome,
Here.
Delegate Helmer, Delegate Bell,
Here.
Delegate Austin,
Here.
Delegate Adams,
Here.
Delegate LaRock,
Here.
Delegate Freitas, Delegate Yares, Delegate Walker,
Present.
Delegate Wyatt,
Here.
Delegate Avoli.
Here.
Thank you so much. I don't believe we're going to be in need of a quorum today, but I think we have one.
Senator Marsden, this is Delegate Bagby. I'm present.
Oh, great. How you doing?
Hey, Senator Marsden, this is Senator Pillion. I'm here as well.
Good deal.
Yeah, Senator Newman's here as well.
And Senator McClellan.
All right, there you go. It is, but I don't think I do believe we have a quorum on both sides. But I don't,
We do have a quorum, Mr. Chair, on the Senate side.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to make a few remarks, and then we'll get on with the program. Certainly, the pandemic has thrown our world that was shaping up pretty well in terms of funding and a path forward in many areas, including transportation. And now, we find ourselves in a situation where there's been a little more doubt. One of the good things is it's discovered, we have discovered a lot of weaknesses in our code that when we're operating under a pandemic, that you find that Commissioner Holcomb, for instance, needed additional authorities in certain areas and the ability to do certain things in an emergency that we probably had never envisioned before. I think most of us always thought that emergencies would be, 2 or 3 days of a snowstorm or a flood or a hurricane or a tornado, some of these things that are quickly getting things back to normal. But as we can see, this is going to be a very disruptive period of time. And I think it's affecting all areas of the Commonwealth. Transportation being one of them. Certainly, I appreciate the administration kind of rearranging our funding to push it forward to keep projects online, because we certainly are going to need these projects to be completed and functioning for us as soon as possible. But the pandemic has put some uncertainty into our future. I was looking the other day, and in the city of San Francisco, they have started driverless electric shared vehicle on-demand car service in the city of San Francisco. I think the beginning of a very disruptive period of time in terms of technology, as it's going to affect transportation, has begun, and this will be rolling out over the next 10 years. We've already seen, for instance, the changes in work patterns. That commercial real estate, the footprint that companies need, may be smaller. That workers will be working more from home. There may be some relocation from inner urban areas to more ex-urban areas or rural areas as people realize that they can conduct their business in ways that are equally productive for them. So the business environment is changing. And I've seen some fairly compelling evidence that driverless electric shared vehicles is in our future. In other words, people won't own cars. I'm already running into anecdotal situations of older couples like myself and my wife who are deciding, gee, do we really need 2 cars? If we have a conflict, one of us can Uber. these are the sort of the beginnings of this disruptive technology change. Saw evidence that families could save up to $6,000 a year by not owning a car and just summoning a driverless shared electric vehicle that they can do their business in. That malls and expensive restaurants will send a car to pick you up. Will you be arranging ad hoc carpools in the morning through through our technology to get you to work? Will people take driverless vehicles to the metro or to other transit points in the area to access transit, or will the improved efficiency of moving transportation through these driverless vehicles, will that put a crimp in the number of people using mass transit? These are questions that we don't know. All we know is that the signs are beginning. There is a driverless electric vehicle that is now serving Northern Virginians in Fairfax County near Fairfax Hospital at what's called a Mosaic District, which is a very, very large town hall center, taking people 1 mile without a driver on public roads to the Dunloring Metro Station. We're also beginning to see it's been delayed by the COVID pandemic, but personal delivery devices was approved by both of our committees last year and passed on to the floor. Think 500-pound refrigerators on wheels that will be operating at 25 miles an hour, mostly on suburban streets. There has been a community selected for the trial in Virginia, but it had to be delayed because of the pandemic, and we're likely to see that coming up soon. So throw that alongside, and we have David Skiles with us today to talk about unmanned vehicles, but you're starting to see plans in Florida for air transport in small, low-flying vehicles to connect Tampa and Orlando in pilotless vehicles. And people are innovating in all parts of the country. And I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we educate ourselves on what's happening in other places in the country, and prepare Virginia for really a revolution in disruptive technology that will certainly affect transportation and employment and careers and any number of things. But be ready and be prepared. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks by introducing my old friend and former colleague in the House of Delegates when I was there, Secretary of Transportation Shannon Valentine. Shannon, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Marsden and Chairman Quinn. So great to be with you and with the distinguished members of House and Senate Transportation. In so many ways, both Madam Chair and you, Chairman Marsden, have really set up this entire presentation. It's a very brief project overview, but I did want to introduce this just acknowledging where we are. And with that, I do believe we have a slide deck. Is it available? I'm happy to speak, but it just might be easier.
Pardon me, Secretary, are you able to share those from your computer yourself using the screen share feature?
Oh, you know what? I don't have it. Amy,
okay.
I'll tell you what, Nick, would you mind? Amy has the final draft, which I believe she was sending over, which is not in my possession right now. But I'm happy to just kind of introduce this, and then we can bring the slides on if that would work for you.
Sure, and we'll try to get it set up on our side as well, if you just give us a moment.
Okay. So thank you.
Hey, Shannon.
Yes.
Madam Secretary, I thought I might be able, I'm not sure if I can actually make the technology work, but I have the final version.
Oh, you do?
So I can try and do this, but if you just bear with me.
If you have the slideshow open and then hover towards the bottom center, share screen, you click on that, it'll open up a window, and then click on that presentation and then put it in slideshow mode.
I apologize at the moment. Apparently, I do not have my settings right. So, Shannon, I'm going to have to log out and log back in.
I believe Michael York on the House Clerk side may be able to get them up presently. Thank you very much, Michael.
Michael. Thank you. So, do I need to advance it, or can you advance the slides?
I can advance the slides. Just please tell me when, Madam Secretary.
Okay. Are you Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Michael. Shannon Valentine. Next slide, please. So, as we've already heard this morning, you know, just this very unprecedented time of where we all find ourselves. I think it's really important for you all to know that from the beginning of this pandemic, that the health and safety of our customers, our employees, our partners have been our top priority. Across the entire Secretariat, from the port, barges, trucking, aviation, rail, and transit, there has been a consistent commitment to understand the role of transportation in transporting critical goods and connecting people to essential work, food, medicine, PPE, and now vaccines. And so it has been a very significant part. We've had many, many frontline workers, and I am just so grateful to them every single day for the part they have played. As safety and health remain our top priority, we are also having to deal with the financial implications of COVID. I will go into a little more detail in a couple of the following slides, but as we've been dealing with what will be predicted to be an $870 million reduction in revenues through FY22, we have also introduced in the special session a budget amendment to help us address those reductions. And as I talk about that, I will say to you that we would not be in the position that we are today to manage COVID and the financial implications without so many of the decisions of this General Assembly. Beginning in 2018 with the dedicated funding for Metro, with the I-81 interstate funding the following year, with the completion of a sustainability study on transportation revenues across the system, which led to the omnibus bill that was passed last year, which restructured transportation funding. It provided the structure for the Transforming Rail in Virginia. It created the Transit Ridership and Incentive Program. And this often goes under the radar, but it created the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, which is really a financial commitment to a multimodal transportation system in Virginia. That decision really set the platform for Virginia's future in transportation, and I just can't tell you how important that piece of legislation was. And finally, Chairman Marsden and Chairman McQuinn, you have mentioned this on many, many times in conversations and in presentations, the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion, environmental stewardship, innovation. Those alone could be a separate presentation to you, but I wanted to let you know that these values, the creativity, the ingenuity is being built into our entire transportation platform. It's not just a program, it is a process that we continue to prioritize. We are working through this with our workforce, our planning process, all of our prioritization programs and implementation. I think one of the great lessons of 2020 as we look back is really understanding the role of transportation and in particular transit to economic growth, competition, and creating a sustainable economy that works for everyone. So that is something that encompasses all of transportation. And I'll be happy to answer questions about that at the end, but certainly this is integrated into all that we do. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, that the governor and Secretary Lane announced that we were going to be down about $870 million through FY22. Participating today, if you recall our most recent round of Smart Scale, it was down. It was for about $850 million, the entire Commonwealth for 2 years. So for us to face that kind of revenue reduction is significant. Rather than looking at what other states are having to do with canceling projects, delaying contracts, laying off workers, our priority has been throughout this to maintain our pipeline of projects, to maintain our workforce, and to contribute to Virginia's recovery. We're all awaiting the forecast coming out tomorrow. And so as we move forward, living through this time of uncertainty, we are all walking together. Next slide, please. So during the special session, you all will remember that the governor, working with many of you, provided a budget amendment that provided flexibility to the Commonwealth Transportation Board for just 2 years. It is very, very limited, and it is looking at the 6-year window and identifying those projects that receive funding in the early years, but do not require that funding until years 3, 4, 5, and 6, according to their own schedules. We are now able to put those dollars to work to maintain all of our infrastructure priorities. The board was presented with an initial budget at the November meeting last December 9th. The board took action on the 6-year improvement plan to implement that flexibility. Next slide, please. The flexibility is really based on $495 million of revenue in the revenue sharing program. We were able to allocate dollars in early years to fund ongoing projects and to restore that funding within the 6-year window. All of that information is being communicated to the governor and chairs of the money committee. All the projects are in the 6-year window. They are on time and on schedule. That has been our motivation in moving through this. Would not be possible without the flexibility you all passed during the special session. The new funding we're anticipating from the omnibus bill will be phased in over the next few years and should be fully funded or fully phased in by FY24. Next slide, please. One of our most significant infrastructure projects is our Transforming Rail in Virginia. It was announced almost a year ago, December 19th. It's a $3.7 billion initiative that involves the agreement with CSX, funding agreements with Amtrak and VRE. All of those pieces are moving forward, and when fully implemented within the decade, it will double the number of Amtrak-supported trains along the 95 corridor. It will enhance service to Newport News and Hampton Roads. It will significantly increase service with VRE, including weekend service. Next slide, please. There have been many moving parts, and Deputy Secretary Donahue and I, who are actually working together to present this information to you, will tell you this has been such a major focus of our efforts over this past year. The funding agreement with Amtrak are in, I would say, the final weeks or months of being finalized. They've committed $944 million to this project. VRE has committed $200 million over the decade. VRE, the board passed that on November 20th, and on December 3rd, I guess its parent organizations, the MVTC in Northern Virginia, PRTC, both approved this funding agreement, so that is now in place. We are working through the final weeks with CSX on a comprehensive rail agreement. Their leadership team actually flew up on December 4th for very productive almost final to execute some final decisions. We actually met in the Department of Aviation in the hangar, and it met all the safety requirements of Mrs. Devin Donahue. So anyway, it was a great place to have the meeting. We are also working with our federal partners on the Long Bridge Act of 2020, which would authorize Virginia and the District of Columbia to build a rail bridge on National Park Service lands. It turns out you can do that with highways, but we actually needed Congress to be able to do this with rail. It has passed the House as a standalone legislation. I have to thank Congressman Byers and Whitman for their leadership on this. The entire Virginia delegation, along with members from Maryland and DC, have been so supportive. It is in the Surface Transportation Bill, the language. It's also in the Appropriations Bill. On the Senate side, Senator Warners and Kane have introduced the legislation. We are working through the conference report right now. And so in the coming days, we hope to be able to have very good news about that. The Virginia Passenger Rail Authority was launched in November. They had their second meeting in December, and we're putting that governance structure in place. They'll be working on the operating and capital budgets, and we'll be working with VRE on the issuance of debt in the last half of 2021. I will say that the final environmental for the Long Bridge project has been approved, so we were able to move forward. And the Surface Transportation Board, to whom we had to present a submission on the fact that we're not a common carrier, that resulted in a very good decision. I think it was just this week, yesterday. So anyway, many moving parts that we're trying to hold together. And I can tell you right now, everyone is still at the table working very hard to get this done through an unprecedented period. So next slide, please. Oh, I'm going to let Nick go over our efforts to create 90 miles of express lanes in Northern Virginia, so important to a multimodal network. So Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. One of the other areas where I think we've seen a lot of progress this year has been in the construction of the express lanes network in Northern Virginia. As Secretary Valentine said, ultimately, we anticipate having more than 90 miles of interconnected express lanes from Fredericksburg to DC and back out to Manassas by the end of 2022. Many of these segments are already open and into service, but this past year, particularly those who've been out on I-95 or I-66, you've probably seen significant construction work on both 66 outside the Beltway and also the FredEx or Fredericksburg extension of the 95 express lanes. Both these projects, but particularly 66, have taken advantage of the lower travel on the interstate corridors this year to really try and expedite construction. And 66 is actually more than halfway complete now. They recently opened the improvements to the 28 interchange, and I think people who have used that corridor have really seen some dramatic construction over this past year. Collectively, these projects, when they are done, will represent more than $5 billion worth of construction, as well as billions of dollars in commitments to transit funding over the term. Next slide. But I also think it's important when we talk about express lanes that we recognize what we're trying to do. Northern Virginia consistently ranks as one of the most congested areas in the country, and our real goal with express lanes is obviously and clearly to try and move more vehicles, but I think as importantly is about moving more people in the space that we have. And so this is a pie chart that actually is a result of the 95 corridor study the General Assembly directed the Commonwealth Transportation Board to complete last year. And what we found in that study is when you look at I-95, and this chart's really focused just kind of on the morning rush hour, we move twice as many people per lane during those morning rush hours in the express lanes as we do in the general purpose lanes. And that increased efficiency is a direct result of the transit use and the high carpooling use along that corridor. And that is something that we are trying to build into all of these projects in Northern Virginia as we move forward. So if you go to the next slide, we really wanted to note that as we work to develop the express lanes network in Northern Virginia, we are trying to ensure that these are about moving more people, and that involves commitments to help fund park and ride lots, to help fund transit service, and other multimodal improvements in those corridors so that we can maximize our ability to move people through them and get folks to work in hopefully a faster and more reliable fashion. And so you can see the various projects where we've already made these commitments on 395, 66 outside the Beltway, 66 inside the Beltway. And we're also currently working to develop and advance a project called 495 Next, which would be the phase one of a two-phase project to help address the bottleneck at the American Legion Bridge. And just recently, earlier this month, Secretary Valentine has committed that that project will also include ongoing transit funding to help support multimodal improvements in that corridor. So again, this is one of the major initiatives that the Secretariat and the CTB have ongoing in Northern Virginia, and we wanted to note that. Moving on to the next slide, though, I also want to talk about something else we spent a lot of time working with the Assembly on, and I want to particularly thank Delegates Austin, Delegate Hurst, and Senator Obenshain, who are all on this committee, for their work with us on the Interstate 81 Corridor Improvement Program. If you recall, the Assembly did pass legislation during 2019, and we wanted to just kind of give an update on our implementation of that. Overall, that was a $2.2 billion package of improvements that was funded through a mix of state taxes and regional fuels tax. We always said that we were going to be moving forward with the operational improvements, safety service patrols, cameras, detour plans, and improvements to parallel routes. I'm pleased to say that VDOT has implemented all of those has implemented most of those, and through 2021, we'll have put all of those in place. We are still working on our towing recovery incentive program, as well as some of the dynamic message signs are not up, but that will all be finished in 2021. I also wanted to thank members of the committee and other members of the Assembly for adopting the bond authorization for I-81 of $1 billion, which will help support the adopted capital plan that the I-81 committee recommended to the CTB. We are going to be pursuing federally subsidized loan through the United States Department of Transportation's TIFIA loan program. We believe there's really favorable rates there that can help us, borrow at very low cost and will, result in some efficient financing. If you move to the next slide, VDOT is aggressively trying to advance these projects. We have included 42 of the 46 projects in the 6-year improvement program. We've actually finished constructing 8 of the acceleration and deceleration lanes, several in each of the construction districts, and another 22 projects are under design. So I just wanted to really, note we put out a schedule working with the I-81 committee, and VDOT has been moving forward and is sticking to that schedule, and will be continuing to stick to that schedule in the coming years to implement this program as expeditiously as possible. On the next slide, there are a few areas where we are continuing to more fully develop the program. So $200 million was set aside in the program for operational improvements, multimodal improvements, truck parking, and speed enforcement. DRPT has been working with the 81 committee to identify potential multimodal improvements. Several options that they have discussed with the committee, though they are all still kind of in the discussion phase, has been expansion of the Virginia Breeze intercity bus service, which has been a very, very successful bus service program the department has supported that runs from Blacksburg to DC. Freight rail spurs to help serve some of the industries along that corridor, and also the potential expansion of intercity rail service, in Roanoke and other areas along the 81 corridor. VDOT has also put together a truck parking task force to work with members of the industry, the service station community, and other folks to try and develop recommendations that can help us address some of the truck parking shortages that exist along this corridor. It's our hope that all of these issues will be fully resolved sometime during 2021 through our work with the 81 committee and also the truck parking task force. Next slide. And Madam Secretary, I will hand it back to you now.
Thank you. Yes, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, the largest transportation construction project in Virginia's history. It has truly been a remarkable partnership with the region. In the last 2 years, we've completed the project agreement for funding and administration, a comprehensive agreement, a master tolling agreement, and at the end of September, the notice to proceed. We had the groundbreaking for this project in October, and we are moving forward, and the tunnel expansion should be completed by the end of 2025. Next slide, please. So again, a partnership, CTB, VDOT, HR TAC. We are also moving forward with the Express Lane Network. There was about $1 billion funded through the toll revenues and HR TAC funds. HR TAC is the major funding project on this project, and simply could not have done this without them investing those dollars. But a truly remarkable economic development opportunity for the region and the Commonwealth. Again, the master tolling agreement was in August, and we're on schedule. Next slide, please. I just didn't want to close out this overview without talking a few minutes just about, the entire transportation system. The Port of Virginia, the expansion that you all have helped to invest in the port, nearly $800 million, really had the capstone back in November, I think November 5th, when these massive container cranes arrived at Norfolk International Terminal. So the expansion at the Virginia International Gateway and at NIT is in its final stages. It has been very important work. And the reason I say this is that even through this pandemic, the Port of Virginia has experienced 6 months of growth, record growth. In fact, for the last 2 months, in October and November, they've moved more than 500,000 TEUs at the port. In the start of the pandemic, we really did not know exactly how this was going to affect us, but the work of the port and the expansion that's taken place, 40% more capacity, it has really been a solid investment for the Commonwealth. The project for wider, deeper, safer dredging to 55 feet is all ahead of schedule. We're predicted to have the dredging done by 2024, and Virginia will once again be the deepest port on the East Coast. It continues to be a catalyst for commerce. Just in FY 2020, there was $1.4 billion of investment through the port, 38 announcements, and more than 5,400 jobs created. I will also say that CEO John Reinhardt announced his retirement this past year. He will be retiring in March. The work and the innovation and the operational expertise that he has brought to the Port of Virginia is a foundation that will last us for generations. He has brought the best and the brightest to the port, and it has just been such a pleasure to work with him. The new CEO at the port is a gentleman named Stephen Edwards. He brings great operational as well as global experience. He comes from TRAPAC out of Los Angeles. He'll be joining us in January, and I hope we have an opportunity to introduce him to all of you. Next slide, please. The work and innovation and the operational expertise that he has brought to the Port of Virginia is a foundation that will last us. I don't know. Am I on a delay? Can you all hear me? Okay. With aviation, there has been no mode of transportation that has felt the impact certainly as much or more than aviation. It is something that's affected all airports and airlines across the country. In trying to address this, our Department of Aviation, under the leadership of Director Mark Flynn, instituted a commercial air service plan, really looking at how we could support our commercial service, commercial airports. And in it, really identifying some solid recommendations, one being to build in flexibility of helping the air carriers to be able to use entitlement funds for operating through this particular period with board approval. It continues to be a challenge. We're down about 60% on average at our airports across Virginia, and we continue to monitor that every day. We've actually launched the Aviation Systems Plan. It is really looking at the role that aviation plays within the Transportation Secretariat and as an economic development factor to the Commonwealth of Virginia. So that work has been begun. I just wanted to point out that workforce development continues to be a major issue with aviation. It seems counterintuitive, but there's a real concern that through COVID, with the retirements, early retirements, people leaving the field, that there will be a real shortage when we're back on track. So the Department of Aviation is working very hard to be ahead of that schedule. Next slide, please. And our spaceport. Virginia Space is really emerging as a leader in the commercial space industry. This past year, we launched NG Northrop Grumman 13 and 14 in 2020, February 15th, and on October 2nd. Those missions go to the International Space Station and conduct more than 250 science and research projects. We are also working with National Reconnaissance Office for some national security launches using our payload processing center, which is a facility, which is another investment that the General Assembly has made that is again paying off. The Mars Pad and Rocket Lab collaboration is going forward. We constructed an LC-2 pad for Rocket Lab. It is a small rocket, agile, responsive company, which pairs perfectly with Virginia Space, and we're anticipating a launch in 2021. And then the integration of the control facility. I had a meeting with NASA last week with the center director and associate center director on the master plan for Virginia Space and the NASA Wallops Flight Facility, the commitments they are making. It is just a very strong, remarkable partnership. And we should be able to see some exciting things in the future. Next slide, please. Nick.
Yeah, so there are several other items that we don't have much of an update on today, but are items that we expect there will be a fair amount of work on over the coming year. And so we wanted to highlight those here as we transition into the new year, because we suspect these are things that we will be talking to each of you all about that are the results of kind of work this past year with the General Assembly. And so the Central Virginia Transportation Authority has been established. It is up and running. They have held several meetings, organized themselves, and are now starting to work on their regional prioritization process. This is modeled after the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission and the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. So as they work to identify regional projects and partner with the state to help advance projects in the area, we're hopeful that we'll be able to see some of the same progress that we have seen in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads through this authority. Also in the Hampton Roads region, dedicated funding for the first time ever has been provided to Hampton Roads Transit through the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Fund managed by HR TAC to help implement the regional backbone of transit routes that was identified in their urban strategic plan. We also established the Transit Ridership Incentive Program as a part of the Governor's Omnibus Transportation Bill. And this is really focused on giving grants to the transit agencies in areas over 100,000 to try and focus on key routes that cross jurisdictional boundaries, similar to the regional backbone in Hampton Roads, and making sure that we have a regional transit system that works in these areas, but also looking at ways to try and reduce burdens on low-income users of our transit system to try and make sure that these systems work well for all of the users. And then finally, the Virginia Highway Safety Improvement Program was established with a higher level of funding for safety. This is the first time we've had dedicated state funds provided for safety. The Secretary has talked how, unfortunately, we have seen some trends that we haven't liked in the past few years on the safety front. And so, we are going to be working with the Commonwealth Transportation Board to really implement this program, put in place a key prioritization process as required by law, and really focus on both behavioral and systemic safety improvements that can hopefully start to, reduce fatalities and severe injuries on Virginia highways. Again, today, we don't have much to say other than to say there's going to be more to say about these in the coming months, and we wanted to really highlight those for you all because we think these are important things that came out of the past session. Next slide.
So I will just close this portion of transportation by saying that we in Virginia have a remarkable multimodal transportation system from 66 airports, the port, Virginia Space, the Department of Rail and Public Transportation with rail and transit and metro and highways and bridges, 1,600 miles of trails that we continue to invest and expand across Virginia, with bikeways and trails and pedestrian paths becoming a very important part of our transportation system. But also a part of it is our work with the Motor Vehicle Dealer Board and with DMV. And I know that Commissioner Holcomb is joining us today. I will simply say about Commissioner Holcomb and Deputy Secretary Donahue, I just couldn't ask for better partners in all of our work, but certainly in helping to manage this unprecedented time.
Secretary Valentine, thank you. I have on my agenda that John Lawson was going to be joining us for part of the presentation, or is that no longer operative?
No, Nick and I just chose to divide it up. It seemed, yes, so Deputy Secretary Lawson was not on this presentation, just Nick and me.
Okay, great. Just one question for you that I have, and then I'll throw it open to
Followed by Commissioner Holcomb.
Yes, I had a question. What is, in terms of the next project in Northern Virginia, where is the state of Maryland on their plans for the American Legion Bridge? What's your assessment of where they are?
The governors announced the agreement in principle in November of 2019. Secretary Slater and I have continued to work together. And whenever I'm in Northern Virginia with him and he restates their commitment to doing American Legion Bridge, I always point out it's the most important thing he could say. We jointly last December launched a transit TDN study to investigate how we could work together to build transit into this solution. The recommendations, I believe, are coming out in January. It's been a great partnership with Maryland. And in addition to that, our Commissioner of VDOT, Steve Britch, and their Administrator of Highways, Tim Smith, are continuing to meet assigned responsibility. Our technical teams are working together. Our commercial teams are working together. So all of that is moving forward. I will say that when Nick brought up the commitment bringing up 495 Next, there is great utility to 495 Next for many reasons. One, with the express lanes saving 24 minutes for transit, van pools, carpools, significant reduction in cut through traffic through neighborhoods. I also believe that it was very important, and I sent a letter off to Chairman Jeff McKay about our commitment to transit. And I've asked the VDOT team and the Fairfax County transportation team to work together to determine how we actually deliver transit as part of the solution. And so that's where that particular issue is right now.
Well, thank you, Secretary Valentine. Are there any other questions from our joint committee? Got Senator Favola and then then Delegate Murphy. Anyone else?
Oh, okay. It's the same question.
Delegate Murphy may have a question on the project, the I-495 Next project. Mine's on something different. So I'll defer if she's going to continue to talk about this.
Delegate Murphy.
Oh, I was just going to ask if we could please have a copy of whatever she shared with Supervisor McKay.
Oh, I'd be happy to. And in fact, we had a conversation about it yesterday. So yes, I would be happy to share that. And I'd also be happy to share a letter that Secretary Greg Slater from Maryland and I wrote together to the environmental community about our commitment to multimodal solutions with the with the Capital Beltway Accord.
We'd appreciate all of that. Barbara and I deal with this every day.
Yes.
Also more than once a day.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I can imagine. I will just add this one thing that as both you and Senator Favola know, that I've asked Chief Deputy Commissioner Rob Carey to be a liaison with my office. So we speak nearly every day about this project. Okay. So I have somebody, reporting to the office about this. He has compiled a list of the outreach taking place, and I'd also really like to get that to you as well.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Favola, up next.
I think somebody else called you. Am I next? I do have a question, but it's a different topic.
Oh, yeah, that is, I don't know that, Delegate Rome, is this a follow-up question on the?
Yeah, I have a separate question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's go with Senator Favola and then to Delegate Rome.
Okay, all right. This has to do with the low-income grants to jurisdictions to come up with creative ways to reach their low-income population and get them to partake more in our transit, right? We want to ensure that our low-income riders have equal access to transit and to metro services. So my question is, are you shaping these grants in a way that will reflect an emphasis on greater outcome to low-income communities? Either jurisdictions have to get commuter buses to pick people up to bring them to metro, or are you shaping the grants, maybe it's a combination of both, on how to support low-income individuals who may not be living in low-income communities, but certainly need some kind of support to ride transit? How broadly are you shaping the grant program, and are you going to allow creativity both in terms of, like I just explained, geographically and individually? I guess you get the question.
Yes. Well, no, yes. And I'm going to ask Nick to follow up as well. I'm just going to say a few kind of some broad things and then discuss the transit incentive program that I believe that you're referring to. Number one, in the omnibus legislation, we are making a commitment to a multimodal system. So I will say this, that we've actually stabilized transit in a way we have never done before. So it doesn't have to be just through this incentive program. It can be how we conduct transportation. So I put that out there because I really believe that we should be looking to integrate these kind of accessibility, mobility issues within our planning. We should start at the beginning. So through the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, with Deputy Secretary Donahue and Deputy Director Ronique Day, we are really working to integrate that kind of perspective into the planning process in the beginning. So that's number one. Number two, we build it into our prioritization process. So we have smart scale in different ways that we can address it there. And then finally, not finally, but as another way, is through the TRIP program that Nick described in looking forward. And so Nick, are you, do you want to just provide an update on where the planning for the Transit Ridership Incentive Program is?
Yes, thank you, Madam Secretary. And Senator Favola, I think to your question, we are actually working right now with the CTB to shape exactly how this program will work. The first dollars will be available starting July 1. So in the coming months, we'll really be able to flesh out exactly how some of these details work. One of the first steps that we actually took was putting out a request for information to the industry and other stakeholders to see some of the things that they thought where funding might be able to help. We should be getting information back on that, I think actually later this week, or maybe even tomorrow. In that area, I think one of the things that's also new about how the TRIP program or Transit Ridership Incentive Program works relative to our previous transit programs is the existing programs are all essentially based on revenue, miles, costs, or other things of that nature, whereas in the TRIP program, applicants will need to submit grants to indicate what it is they intend to do with that. And so it will give us the opportunity to evaluate those and also work with them in ways to make sure that we're funding some of these more meaningful ways to try and address some of the issues that you raised, but also looking at maybe trying out new ideas that are able to kind of move the ball forward there and trying to address some of those issues in ways perhaps we weren't able to do previously with some of just the pure formula dollars that we've had in the past.
Okay. Thank you so much,
Thank
Secretary
you.
Valentine, Secretary Donahue. Delegate Rome, you're up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I have just two questions for Secretary Valentine, so I'd be happy to proceed.
Good, please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first, Secretary Valentine, thank you so much for briefing us today, and to Deputy Secretary Nick Donahue, thank you so much for being a part of this as well. Always wonderful working with both y'all. So I've got some concerns that are kind of local in this area, and then one that deals with MBTA. So one of the challenges that we've really had in the greater Prince William area is as we are trying to make our intersection designs a lot safer, basically using innovative intersection designs, using star studies, as we've been doing on Route 28, for example. When we don't have corridor-wide improvement programs that we can put to the MBTA or we can put to Smart Scale, for example, because they will be competitive for congestion mitigation as well as improving the safety of our roadways. One of the problems that we end up having is that we have these relatively what should be easy-ish intersections and such that we should be able to improve, but we can't identify sources of money for them. A great example for this is Rollins Ford Road in Gainesville. We had a fatality there a couple of years ago. We had a school bus accident there. There's too much speeding on the road. It's too wide. There's a lot of issues, and it's an entirely residential area. We're just trying to install 3 modern roundabouts in that area that would take care of all the problems that we have, including actually making it easier for pedestrians to get across the street because it would narrow the amount of roadway that someone would have to cross. We're talking about $4.5 million. The problem is that because it doesn't score high enough for congestion mitigation, because it's inherently about safety, we can't apply for Smart Scale. And because we can't apply really for MBTA with that, and because the program or the improvements that we need wouldn't be a corridor of statewide significance or a corridor that would have regional impact, because we're trying to make this basically 2-mile stretch of road safer, we won't be able to qualify for Smart Scale. So I've got this problem in my district where it's not just located in that one area. We've got one over at a railroad crossing over in Haymarket at Route 15, where repeatedly the county's gone up in front of the MBTA requesting money basically for an overpass over the railroad crossing and to widen the road over there, because that railroad is a safety problem. The problem that we have, though, is, again, it doesn't score very high because safety in that regard is not deemed as a priority. And now we've just recently shifted money that would have gone toward that project to a commuter parking lot over in Woodbridge. And so I'm trying to figure out, do we as legislators need to create a separate fund that we can use statewide to make our that'll be entirely dedicated to making our roadways safer, to making intersection design safer, for example? Can we get some direction or just an idea maybe for what we can do to identify pots of money for what should be relatively small projects, but are being, quite frankly, unfunded because the funding mechanisms that we have aren't really adequate for it?
Delegate Rome, I can tell you that, every transportation district in the Commonwealth faces these issues. How do we find the right program for certain projects? But I will mention this, particularly since you bring up safety. The program that we're going to be looking at this year, that was again in the omnibus bill, really puts a high priority on safety. One of the shifts that's taken place on the Commonwealth Transportation Board is away from these larger spot improvements, kind of one-time improvements, but again, looking at the corridors, looking at our roadways, where we're able to implement more systematic investments, which actually have been far more, have great return to far greater return on our investment by doing that. So I think there's an opportunity for us to address that in a much better way, in a more effective way. Nick, I'm going to ask you a question that, Mary Hines, who works in the Northern Virginia district as well, is raising the same issue with us as far as planning. I just didn't know from your discussion, did anything come up that would be helpful at this point?
I think there are two things I would say, Madam Secretary and Delegate Rome. I think one, Delegate Rome, I'd love to follow up with you offline about that project, because I think that particularly the first project should qualify for smart scale, and I want to make sure that either in our folks who are reviewing those applications, we didn't misunderstand something or give the county the wrong impression there, if I've understood kind of the project as you've described it kind of correctly. So again, I'd love to follow up with you and just make sure we haven't confused the issue in interacting with the local staff there, because I would hate if that had happened. And then I think the other thing that the Secretary was mentioning that we're currently working on as a part of the VTrans process is starting to identify where the state will focus the dollars it spends to develop projects to get them ready. Because I think another problem that we have in a lot of those instances is we know there's an issue, but we don't necessarily have a developed solution available, that even if funding came out of the sky somewhere, unless you have plans or an idea, the funding can't build anything. And so we're really going to be spending time with the CTV finalizing a policy in the coming months that's going to talk about how we're focusing our dollars to develop projects. And it sounds like maybe one of the things we need to ensure is done adequately in all parts of the state is, taking into account safety there. I know it's a big part of how we're looking at it today, but I think we can go back to the team and make sure that particularly in areas where otherwise congestion is weighted heavily, that we make sure that safety isn't given short shrift. And I do know we've talked about increasing the weight, particularly as we spend money to develop projects for that safety issues, there. So I think we can follow up with Ms. Hines and then also maybe follow up with you on that and talk about some of the things we're looking at.
That would be really helpful. So thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I have a very brief second question. Just regarding thank you. Just regarding American Legion Bridge 495 next. The information that was presented to the MBTA, and I'll note that Delegate Watson, Senator Boysko, who are on this call, obviously we all three of us serve on the MBTA. The information that was presented to us on MBTA really made it seem like mass transit was being completely treated as an afterthought in regard to the 495 extension. And a lot of us raised significant concerns about the environmental effect that we were looking at there, where there was 55 acres of wilderness off the top of my head that would be affected. But at the same time, in front of the MVTC, we've heard from DRPT, for example, that mass transit is being integrated as part of this project. And so it seemed like we were getting some different messages depending on whether you're on MBTA or MVTC. I think just reflecting a comment that Board Member Crystal and I both certainly share is that as we're dealing with these widening projects, especially, we're just really looking for a way to make our mass transit planning more integrated with these highway expansions, and trying to do so in the least environmentally damaging way possible, so that as we are trying to actually deal with climate changes, we're trying to develop green transportation policy that we're treating it as a priority as opposed to something that's left behind.
Can I just say, I couldn't agree with you more. We are working across Virginia and certainly in Northern Virginia to make sure that we're integrating whatever multimodal improvement is required to improve the corridor, because it is about moving people. And so that has been our focus. Now with Project Next, you will most likely see someone from DRPT and VDOT making a presentation together, integrating those solutions. And we hope, the investments we're able to make in multimodal and transit has really been through our highway projects, building that into the investment. So that is a priority for us. I just think you raised a really good point. Anyway, so where it hasn't happened, we are working very hard to address that.
Okay. Thank you, Secretary Valentine. Before I turn it back over to Chairman McQuinn to introduce our next speaker, are there any further questions? Delegate Watts.
Thank you so much. I had done the hands up in the mechanically. Anyway, the question goes back to the very beginning. I realize that tomorrow that the governor will be presenting to the joint money committees, which is always the prelude to actual budget amendments for the caboose budget. Secretary Valentine, you made reference to revenues to fill the gap related to the COVID shortfalls in transportation revenue. Are you at liberty at this time to give us some idea where that revenue is coming from? Last time you reprogrammed, so it was all internal shifting. Is there outside money coming in? Again, can you give any details of where that revenue is coming from to meet the shortfall?
Well, it's all within our 6-year window. We are actually using revenue sharing, the $445 million that have been allocated in early years, but not required until the outer years. We're actually putting those dollars to work today. And because they get funded in early years, we're able to restore all. Delegate Watts, you're able to see how the money is being used, how the money is restored, and that all the projects are there completed on time. So it is all done. It is a cash management solution to deal with the shortfall in transportation.
Do I understand then, Madam Secretary, that this then is basically an extension of what was authorized last year?
We are implementing the authorization.
But so, going into, will there be additional budget amendment language looking forward?
I never, ever want to get ahead of the governor.
I gotcha. Okay. Tomorrow.
Okay.
Well, we're all going to be, we're all going to be learning some things tomorrow and finding out exactly where we are. But with what we know today, we are doing our best to manage transportation, to keep our priorities on track, keep our workforce, and contribute to recovery. That's what we're really working to do.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Valentine. Any other questions from the committees? Well, thank you. I want to turn this back now over to my friend, Chairman McGuinn, and let her introduce our next guest.
Thank you, Chairman Marston, and certainly to Secretary Valentine and also Deputy Secretary Donahue. Thank you for the presentation. One of the things that I think that has happened that we all have realized is that the gaps, the inequities, COVID has exposed so many things, and we see how diligently you all are working to help address it, and we are very appreciative of that. And so that sort of helps me to morph into this other introduction in terms of Commissioner Richard Hogan, who certainly has had his hands full during this period trying to address the many challenges that came about as a result of COVID-19. And once again, we are grateful to all of those who represent and serve in the transportation department. You guys have done an amazing job in helping to keep the ball rolling. So at this time, would you join me as we present from the Department of Motor Vehicle updates, Commissioner Richard Holcomb. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair McQuinn, and I think my slides are getting ready here, coming up. Again, I'm Rick Holcomb, DMV Commissioner. I'm joined today by Jessica Sire, who will be forwarding my slides on my PowerPoint. Certainly, DMV has learned a lot since mid-March, but I am very proud of DMV's response to the pandemic by continuing to provide service while instituting safeguards necessary for the health and well-being of our customers and employees. Let me take you back in time a little bit. Here is pre-COVID. These are pictures actually from March 14th, the Saturday before the governor took some very bold moves in curbing the spread of virus. These are typical days on a Saturday where you would sit shoulder to shoulder with 200 of your best friends, hoping to be called at some time to have your transaction done. As you can see, no social distancing, no face covering, and certainly it was painfully obvious to us that this model of service was not going to work during COVID. And quite frankly, I don't see us going back to this type of service delivery. And certainly the 1 million people who have been served in the face-to-face DMVs would probably agree that this is not something we want to return to. As you know, the governor on March 17th issued Executive Order 7 that closed all the DMVs, the DMV to go and the DMV connects, and at the same time extended credentials, both vehicle and driver, while we were closed. Now that executive order was modified multiple times, 5 different times by the governor, and leading to a phased-in reopening, which started May the 18th. Now, I will say the governor put in his budget, and the General Assembly did approve some authority for the commissioner to use to actually extend credentials in the middle of emergencies instead of having to have the governor issue executive orders. I certainly think that it would be prudent for the General Assembly to codify that budget language, and we would be expecting legislation on that. As I said, we were closed for 2 months from March 18th to May 18th, but that just meant that our customer interfacing customer service centers were closed. We continued to do business. In fact, we did 1.7 million transactions during that point and collected over $400 million in revenue for the Commonwealth. Now, since we've started our phase reopening on May 18th, we have conducted more than 8.8 million transactions, all across the multiple service platforms, and have collected $1.7 billion for the Commonwealth. I think what's most impressive of that 8.8 million number of transactions is that 84% of those transactions were done by modes other than coming into a customer service center and doing it face to face. Certainly, we have seen a migration of transactions out of the customer service centers. Normally, we would get about 7,500 titles mailed into the DMV to process. That has jumped up to 13,000 per month. Normally, we would see, actually, I would tell you that we've grown our online dealer program during the pandemic and during the period that we were open and closed and open. We've added 209 dealers. We're up to 3,300 online dealers that are processing title work for customers that buy from them. In fact, they have processed more than 1 million transactions for the DMV since we've reopened on May 18th. Our auto auctions also have increased their output for us. Normally, before COVID, they would do about 5,000 titles, about 1,000 registrations per month. That's jumped up to 5,600 titles and 1,600 registrations. As I said, starting on May 18th, we started our phased reopening. We're very proud that our reopening plan was signed off by the Virginia Department of Health, and it includes social distancing as a must. And we've moved chairs out of the lobby to accommodate the social distancing. We are only serving every other window, but even those windows, we now have plastic partitions between our customers and our employees. Appointments are now required. That's the only way that we can maintain the necessary social distance in a safe environment. And as you will see, this is the new DMV. You remember the picture from the Chesterfield office earlier. This is every other window open. We're serving a customer at the window, and we have a customer on deck. And quite frankly, the customers love it because they are in and out in probably half an hour to 45 minutes. There is no waiting. Once you check in, you're seated in the on-deck chair, and you're up to the front counter in very quick order. Again, as you can see, face coverings are required, both for our employees and our customers. If a customer arrives without a face covering, we offer them one at no cost, unless the customer has a medical reason why they can't wear a mask. Obviously, hand sanitizer, we're making that available for customers as well as our employees. And in fact, we now have a new position that we call a floor coordinator, which is a DMV employee that will actually go to the front counter after a customer has left and wipe down the area to disinfect and make sure that all the equipment like credit card machines, the eye machines are thoroughly wiped down and disinfected before the next customer comes up. Again, different customer flow. The customer shows up at the office, is greeted outside, as you can see from this picture, or just inside the office when we might have bad weather. We also are making sure, and we have signs posted with the health questions that we want our customers to ask themselves, and the same health questions that we have our employees ask themselves every day about whether you've been exposed, whether you've been tested, to try to make sure that we're not letting folks in who might be infectious. I will tell you, we have also had to come up with a whole different way of doing road tests or skills tests. It is clearly not safe to put two people shoulder to shoulder in the front seat of a car to do a skills test. So based on a model that we saw in Maryland and in South Carolina, we now do the skills test in a parking lot at the DMV, where we have certain maneuvers that they have to successfully complete in order to pass. Now, it's no surprise, we post on the website what those maneuvers are, and the examiner stands outside of the car and instructs the applicant on what maneuvers to make. If the applicant needs help in interpreting, the applicant can bring an interpreter to them, and the interpreter will then give the instructions that our employee has given. And quite frankly, we have seen no difference in the pass-fail rate of what we're doing now as compared to being in the car with the applicant. I will also tell you, we are very proud that we were able to get a approval by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration on a new test model, skills test model for CDL. It's very similar. The applicant is in the truck with another licensed truck driver. We are following in a chase car, and we are relaying instructions through a hands-free phone to ensure that they are doing what needs to be done. I will also tell you, we have really expanded our CDL knowledge testing partnership. And in fact, just since March 18th, we have had 18 jurisdictions sign up with us, where they have been skills test third-party partners with us, but now they can be knowledge tests. And 18 jurisdictions, primarily doing school bus knowledge tests for their bus drivers. And we also have 5 transit companies across Commonwealth who are also involved in that. Now, to give you a current picture of where we are, 73 of our 75 offices are open. The only 2 offices that are not open are Lexington and Smithfield. Those were offices that had about a 200 square foot lobby, no public restroom, no rear door, so we could not really accommodate social distancing. Our new Lexington office is scheduled to open first part of February, and our new Smithfield office will open a little later after that. But we are supporting the Smithfield area through our DMV to go on a monthly basis. Now, for our Northern Virginia folks who particularly represent part of Loudoun County, we're opening our new 76th office on January the 4th. It's a new Sterling office. It's about a half a mile from the existing office, but we have made the decision that at least for 2021, we will maintain the existing Sterling office, which is an owned facility, as well as the new, much larger leased facility. The new facility will be called Sterling Boulevard, and the existing office will be called Sterling Free Court. And so we're excited about the having those new facilities to offer. 51 of our 55 DMV Select partners are open. We have 4 that are not. I wish they would open because they're all in urban areas, 2 down in Tidewater, 2 up in Northern Virginia, but at this point they just don't feel safe in opening, and we look forward to when they can. Our DMV Connect teams have gotten very, very aggressive. We really could not use our DMV to go with which are our mobile units, because there's no way you can guarantee or ensure social distancing in the close quarters that those mobile units have. So we have repurposed that staff to join the Connect teams, and the 14 Connect teams that we've got going. Since May 25th, we've conducted 279 visits all across the Commonwealth and have done over 18,500 transactions. Now, I will tell you, obviously, our website is open 24/7. We have more than 40 transactions to do. And I will tell you, folks who are doing their reg renewals to get their decals, we're seeing a very strong migration out of the customer service centers because, quite frankly, you can do that online and you can do that by the mail, and we're not allowing those transactions at this point. Those are moving to the online and they're moving to mail. And people are getting a discount by doing it that way. Couple of service announcements that have made a very large impact on us. I have administrative authority to actually allow folks who were required to come in to get their driver license renewed because they had renewed their last credential either online or through the mail, and were required now to come in and get a new picture and a new eye screening. We have been able, through my administrative discretionary authority, to allow those individuals to have an option of renewing that credential for 2 years. We all prayed that this pandemic is over in 2 years, and there are a lot of folks who just did not feel safe, even with all the safeguards that we put into our offices, to actually come into a DMV. I want to thank Delegate Simon and the General Assembly for adding to that discretion my ability to allow 75 and older customers also to exercise that option. And let me tell you, they're taking advantage of that in droves. While right here, we say it's 72,000 folks have taken advantage of that. As of today, that number is in excess of 75,000 Virginians who've decided it's safer to stay home, renew for 2 years, and we'll see you in 2022. Out of that, over 6,000 of that 75,000 are folks 75 years and older. I know, at least from the constituent mail we've been forwarded from members of the General Assembly, there are a lot of happy older customers out there that they don't need to come into the DMV for the next 2 years. I will also tell you that we stood up a online renewal process for commercial driver's license. Normally, they would have had to come into the DMV to do that. We stood that up November 19th. Already, 566 people have taken advantage of that. A number of things, other tools that the General Assembly has given us through the special session that I'll go through very quickly, but I want to stop on the slide that talks about the juvenile court. I heard from Senator Morrison, I heard from Delegate Sickles, I've heard from a number of people around the state that we had a lot of upset parents whose juveniles could not get their first-time license because the courts weren't doing the ceremonies. Understandable with the pandemic and with the requirements for social distancing, it's hard to get the juveniles in, and the code requires that they come in to actually have that license, that first-time license, presented to them by a juvenile court judge. We've gotten authority, again, through the special session to work with the courts. And if the courts decide they want to continue the ceremonies, we will continue to send those first-time licenses to the courts to present. If they decide that they would rather not do the ceremonies until it's a little bit safer, we can send the credentials directly to the juvenile at their home. At this point, 70 jurisdictions or 70 courts have said, yes, please send those credentials directly to the juveniles, while 45 has said, you know what, we're going to continue to do the ceremonies. We're still waiting to hear from 10 others, but I think that's going to be a tremendous tremendous increase or tremendous benefit to our parents and their children. Obviously, appointments, as I said before, we can't maintain social distancing. We can't have hundreds of people in the lobbies like those pictures from March 14th showed. So in 3 weeks' time, with an investment of about $3,000, we set up a new appointment system. I will admit to you, it does not have all the bells and whistles that we want to have. We will be doing integrating a more robust appointment system in the spring of 2021. But quite frankly, we're learning as we go. But let me tell you, the folks who are coming in and having appointments, as you'll see from the next screen, 87% of the people we have polled, and we started sending follow-up emails in August to everyone who came in and had an appointment. 87% of the people say that that we met their expectations or exceeded their expectation. 85% were satisfied or very satisfied with their service, and 98% really took notice of the safe environment that we created for our customers. Now, there are clearly some folks who are not satisfied. I'm not going to show you all the quotes that we got from the open-ended, but I'd ask you to look at that very last one. This was by far my best experience I've ever had at any DMV anywhere, and I'm 78 years old. So that's the type of response that we want to have. Now, yes, there are some who miss the days that you wake up in the morning and say, you know what? I want to go to the DMV today. I want to sit next to hundreds of people. I want to hear my number called, an hour or two later, and be served. We are learning how to do the appointment system better. When we first started, we'd only post appointments 32 days out. Now we post them 92 days out. We're currently offering over 1,200 appointments a day during the week. 5,500 on Saturday. Unfortunately, we've got about a 14% no-show rate. Now, what we are doing to compensate for that, we are double and triple booking. And I will also tell you, we are finding and encouraging people to do things online or through the mail. And the 75,000 people who are now renewing their license through a 2-year option, we're seeing a lot of appointments being canceled. So for your constituents who are saying, gosh, I can't get an appointment, be patient. Be patient with us, but keep looking, and the availability comes up every single day. I will tell you one side benefit of the appointment system is we've got a lot of folks in Virginia who are learning the geography of Virginia. We have had some Northern Virginians who made an appointment in Jonesville down in Lee County and realized that maybe they didn't want to drive 8 hours or more to an appointment. So they're now figuring out where offices are. But again, like I said, we've got 1.9 million appointments we've made. And quite frankly, with the online abilities, with the mail abilities, anybody right now in this month that still needs to renew their license, 98% of the folks can do it online or through the mail. As for vehicle, 99% of folks out there who have not renewed their tags don't need to come into the DMV. They can do it online. If they don't have a computer, all they need is a stamp and know where a mailbox is. So we're pretty excited about that. Now, for those who are saying, let's go back to the good old days and open the DMVs up, allow walk-ins, here's what when my colleague in New Jersey decided to reopen their offices to walk-in customers, this is what New Jersey looked like. And clearly, even though most of those folks have masks on, I still would represent to you that that's probably not the image that we want in Virginia. I'm going to go quickly through the next slides. Obviously, we've had staffing challenges. I will tell you, as of today, because of some positive cases and because of contact tracing, I've got 61 frontline DMV employees who are out in quarantine. And we've had a lot of folks retire. We've had a lot of people resign because they just don't want to come back and work in a people interfacing job. But everyone has challenges, and we're working on that. I am pleased that even with positive cases, we have not had to close an office. We have been able to replace those employees who are quarantining with employees from other offices. We are trying to hire up. Obviously, gone are the days where we could bring everyone into a classroom and train them to be a DMV frontline person. We are virtually training and hope to continue being able to not close an office when we have a positive case. Chair, I will next a couple of future initiatives, and one I emailed you on recently. On January the 2nd, DMV will start issuing driver privilege cards. Our website, which I sent you a link to, has all the information you need. We are starting our outreach. In fact, last night, I and a number of my employees participated in a webinar set up by the governor's office that, with the exception of my remarks, was in Spanish. And we had a lot of folks listening in. We got another one that we're going to be doing on Thursday. We are ready to go. I will again ask for your patience because we could see upwards into a couple of 100,000 customers coming in for that credential. And we're going to try to absorb that as best we can. Real ID, we were going very well until the pandemic came. We were, we had gotten over 1.5 million customers with a Real ID. We expect, since we're a voluntary state, to see 2.6 million folks get that credential. One of the wise things that the federal government has done is they've decided, because of the pandemic, they moved the enforcement date from October 1, 2020 to next October. So we do feel that probably second quarter, more like second quarter of 2021, we'll see people start thinking about Real ID again and start coming in. Now, I will tell you, Congress is looking at a Real ID Modernization Act. Unfortunately, Congress does not move as quickly or as efficiently and effective as the Virginia General Assembly. So we fear that any improvements that will come from the Modernization Act will really not hit us in order to help us move customers through before the upcoming deadline. So Chair Morrison, Chair McQuinn, that's my presentation. I know that I probably took more time than was allotted, but I certainly am available for any questions that any member might have.
Thank you, Commissioner Holcomb. We really do, again, appreciate the presentation and the information that's been passed on, and certainly your focus on service and safety, which has been also important. I realized as you were doing the presentation, nothing bring about change is faster than a pandemic. And so we will never, things will never be the same. But at this time, we're going to open it up for the committee, open you up for questions, if there are any questions at this point.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Delegate Hurst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Commissioner. What you all have done at DMV this year is really laudable. It's certainly when we ask everybody to undertake a lot of challenges because of the pandemic, There aren't many state agencies that have seen that, where the rubber meets the road, to use a bad transportation pun like you all have. So congratulations for what you've done. Thank you. And know that it will continue into next year as we get vaccine rolled out. My question is kind of blunt. We were talking about the driver's licensing ceremonies that have been halted and trying to work that out. Has it given your agency any pause to think about the usefulness and practicality of these ceremonies in general, and sending kids to a JNDR court where they have to have a certain dress code? It seems like some elements of that maybe would be ripe for making a policy change to make it easier for kids and their parents to get them their license.
Delegate, I'm not going to step into that. That is a policy that the Supreme Court, the Virginia Supreme Court, has set. I certainly would just mention to you that 70 of the JND courts have decided that they're fine with DMV sending the credential directly to the juvenile. I know that judges like to have that opportunity to hand the license to the juvenile and talk about the need to drive safely.
Yes.
But bottom line is, whatever the General Assembly decides, if they decide that, they like the fact that DMV is sending it directly to the juvenile and their parent, we can do that. I worried that, us actually having to send it might and require us to put more manpower in it. But the bottom line is, we just tell our driver license vendor, instead of sending a package to the Montgomery County J&D court, just send them to the individual. So we're prepared to do whatever the General Assembly says, and whatever y'all think makes sense, we will properly implement.
And Delegate Hurst, let me say this in reference to that. One of the things that I have found out, particularly even from parents, that sometimes the conversation between a judge and that child is good for helping them to be more mature in their driving, particularly young people. And so it is, we probably would be good to have some conversation on that. But sometimes the judges give them a good old fashioned talk about safety and driving and drinking and many other variables that sometimes, if you're not mature enough, you have an opportunity to hear that. Now, you hear it from parents, but it's nothing like hearing from someone dressed in a robe. So I don't know. I think we can certainly talk about that, understanding where you're coming from. Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair, I will never go against the wishes of the chair on this.
No, I don't have.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Who's speaking? Okay, Delegate Bell. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I was trying to find the commissioner. Might I ask the commissioner a question?
Yes.
So, Mr. Commissioner, I don't doubt any of the stats that you gave us in terms of the people that got in being happier with their treatment at DMV. I think that would be predictable when you reduce the number of people coming in. We certainly hear, so that's, I guess, thing one. Thing two, your staff has been very, very helpful to us when someone finally reaches an assembly member and says, I can't seem to get an appointment and I've got some deadline coming up. So with both of those caveats, though, we certainly are hearing from people saying, I'm having a very, very hard time getting an appointment. And I would, I guess, ask, is there some way, as you know, there are people that go in that don't need to, that could probably accomplish it online or through some other method, but there are, I'm thinking of the people that have had their license suspended and getting reinstated, or people that get a DUI, they have to get a license within 60 days. The court-approved license only lasts for 60. And what appears to be happening in traffic court is that very few are successfully navigating that in the time deadlines allowed. And I'm just wondering, would there be any way, any mechanism where you could say, and for the last 30 minutes of each day or the last 10 minutes, you have one line for people that are willing to wait, frankly, as long as it takes, but need to get it done by a certain deadline. I don't know if that's a mechanism that would be worse than having nothing at all. All I know is that you do have people driving. You said you made fun of the person driving to Wise. I can cite you examples of people that have driven 4 or 5 hours just to make sure they can get an appointment by a certain time. And that probably is not how we want to do this. So I would just ask you for any thoughts or just to consider those people when you're trying to set policies. Thank you.
Delegate, I appreciate that. And we did, when we decided what transactions we would do, obviously someone moving right new into the state, they've got to come into the DMV. Someone who needs an original handicap placard, they have to come into us their first time. Now they can renew online, they can get a replacement online or through the mail. Certainly folks who are buying a car, not buying from a dealer, the casual sales. So those are the people we want to see. And so certainly we are trying to take care of everyone. Maybe once we have the vaccination to all of our employees, we can open more windows. Certainly, if we're at 50% now, if we could be at 75%, I don't think you'd get those. I don't think you'd get those calls. My fear on having a walk-in day or saying, "Hey, show up, and maybe we can get to you." We're gonna have those pictures, that scene like you saw from New Jersey, and I don't think anybody in Virginia wants to see that. I hate to sound this way, but I just wish our customers would plan better. We're doing everything we can. Certainly, again, our Connect teams, we've been in Charlottesville multiple times. And I will also tell you, our partner, the treasurer there in the city of Charlottesville, is making a big difference. And I'm so happy that he reopened his select very quickly. And so, yes, we are looking at additional selects. We're looking at additional Connect teams. And again, the fact that out of the 8.8 million transactions done, 6.2 of them didn't come into the DMV. But yes, you're right, sir. There are still people coming in the DMV who could have done it by mail or could have done it online. But they've made the appointment. We're going to serve them. We're not going to turn them away and say, "Sorry, you made the appointment inappropriately."
Madam Chair.
Yes, Delegate Bell.
Maybe I wasn't precise enough. So when someone comes to our office, I always figure we get 1 in 100. There's 99 people that just don't think to call the state legislator. But when they say, "I've been ordered to go by a certain date," is there any advice better? Now, again, we have a special phone number we call, and I appreciate, I'm not underestimating your staff on a one-by-one basis, helping the people that finally reach us. But the more general question would be just, the judge told me I've got to do something within X number of days. I will wait as long as it takes. I will travel as far. Is there something, do you have an answer you want us to give them? In other words, because right now you're identifying systemic issues, and I'm saying there are specific people who are stuck kind of, we'll wait as long, whatever you need us to do, we'll do. We can't seem to get a hold of somebody on the phone. We can't seem to get to a place that's open, and we can't seem to make an appointment by the deadline the court sets. And if you said, I don't know, you've got one poor person in Richmond that has to deal with these court-required emergencies or something, they would do it. And I'm not, if you want to think about it, maybe there are certainly people that are trying to do all they can. They're not being slackers. They're not waiting too long. They just have been ordered to do something, and just within the time frame and the resources available, unless they happen to call their state legislator, they're kind of left out.
Delegate, I appreciate that. And my answer is going to be, that sounds like a real problem that needs to be addressed. Certainly, we get convictions transmitted to us from the court. If we could try to work with the court to have that conviction flagged when there is something that the customer has to do within a limited time frame, then absolutely we could pull that sort of out of the stack, as long as we have some type of way to contact that individual. So let me, Millicent Ford, who's my assistant commissioner for vehicle driver and information services, and she's my liaison to the Supreme Court. Let me commit to you on trying to figure out how we solve that problem. And certainly when we come up with a solution, I'll share it with all of the committees through the chairs. So thank you for pointing that out to me.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions? I think Chairman Morrison, are we supposed to?
Madam Chair, Delegate Watts, just a quick request, please. Could staff send a link to us for both slide presentations?
Yes, we will see that happen. and thank you. Are we scheduled to be over at 3 o'clock, because it's 2:44, and I know we still have one more presentation. So that I didn't, rather than ask.
That is correct. I think David Skiles on his unmanned, if we could
Yes.
get to
Yes.
him.
And I want
do that.
Yes, I want to, Commissioner, thank you. And then I want to encourage the committee. If there are any questions, please just email Commissioner Holcomb to ask. And if it's something that all of us need to be made aware of, I'm sure Commissioner will get that information back to us. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Morrison so that he may introduce David Skiles.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate McQuinn, I appreciate it. I'd like to introduce David Skiles with the Vector Corporation, who's going to be talking to us today about unmanned aircraft systems and a regulatory update on that. And I know we've had a very successful trial of deliveries down in Christiansburg, having material delivered to people's yards down there from local stores. And with that, my constituent and good friend, David Skiles from the Vector Corporation. David, take it away.
Well, Chairman Marsden and Chairwoman McQuinn, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's great to be with everyone today, and seems like forever since we were gathered in Richmond, and I suppose that it was, but appreciate the opportunity to provide a very brief update on unmanned aircraft systems here in the Commonwealth. I thought what might be helpful for me to do is to break this presentation into three sections. One, to talk about the interplay between federal and state regulations. Two, to give you a very brief overview of what we have done in Virginia over the past few years. And then third, to talk about where industry and the regulatory process is headed as it relates to this ever-evolving technology. I'll start by saying that a good way to look at unmanned systems regulations is to recognize that 95% of the regulatory regime is governed by the federal government. This has been a longstanding position that has been maintained and upheld by several federal courts. And it obviously has it makes a lot of sense in that the airspace runs, across the country and cannot be broken up or segmented state by state. And so, generally speaking, the United States government has exclusive sovereignty over the airspace. That said, there are some areas where states can maintain and put in place regulations, and we look at those mostly as they relate to police powers. For example, things such as land use, trespass, and zoning are things that the state governments and local governments can regulate. And to that end, the Commonwealth has taken many steps in that regard over the past few legislative sessions. For example, in 2015, there was passage of legislation dealing with surveillance, and in 2017, passage of legislation dealing with peeping. Again, both federal regulations and state code define unmanned aircraft systems. You'll see those definitions there on slide 2, and generally they fall in line with one another. When we look at key federal regulations, there's really two categories that are important to keep in mind, recreational and commercial uses. Each of these categories have specific requirements as set out by the Federal Aviation Administration. When you look at recreational uses, those typically tend to be less restrictive in terms of getting a license and ability to operate, but are very restrictive in terms of what an operator can do with their drones. And so for a recreational user, you must apply to the FAA, register your drone with the Federal Aviation Administration, and then you are required to operate that drone within 400 feet, or below 400 feet, excuse me, and kept visually within the line of sight. For commercial operations, the process to become an operator is a bit more cumbersome. But with that is the ability to operate your unmanned aircraft system over a larger territory. And so As you'll see there are really two categories within the commercial use sector. One is for a drone that's under 55 pounds, and the other is for a drone that's over 55 pounds. In both cases, the operator must be certified, must take a test, and must register the device with the Federal Aviation Administration. But they are not required to maintain a visual line of sight or keep that drone below a certain altitude. When we talk about commercial uses, that really can span the gambit between deliveries, as you might know them with Amazon or some of the activities going on down at Virginia Tech, or a small business who uses a drone for commercial purposes. So what has Virginia done as it relates to unmanned systems? Well, the answer is quite a bit. As you can see here, there were 4 years of consistent legislation, and I know Delegate Bell can certainly attest to some of the work that was done in the Courts Committee over a number of years. But we really started out during the 2013 session by looking at unmanned aircraft systems from the perspective of them being used by law enforcement or public safety agencies. And at that time, then Delegate Ben Klein implemented or passed legislation that put a moratorium on that use until some of the privacy issues could be looked at. The General Assembly came back in 2015 and removed that moratorium, but in doing so, required that public bodies maintain a search warrant, except for certain circumstances, such as an emergency rescue situation or an Amber Alert or another type of situation such as that. The 2015 session was followed up by the 2016 session, where the General Assembly considered a number of bills dealing with trespass and privacy. Those bills were ultimately sent to the Crime Commission for study, but the one bill that did emerge that year was House Bill 412, which was a McAuliffe administration initiative. And what that legislation did was it created a moratorium on any local government regulations of unmanned aircraft systems. That bill had a sunset date of 2019, but the idea behind that was really to ensure that the Commonwealth had a statewide framework as opposed to a patchwork of regulations that varied jurisdiction to jurisdiction. The following year, there was legislation that dealt with the use of unmanned aircraft systems for peeping or spying, and there was a misdemeanor that was assigned to that. And of course, there was perhaps the most important legislation that the General Assembly has ever considered, that carried by Senator Marsden, that provided a fire chief or other public safety official to take control of the immediate airspace in the event of an emergency. That was followed up in 2018 by what we like to call as the Omnibus Unmanned Aircraft System legislation that was introduced by Senator Mark Obenshain and then Delegate Chris Collins and Delegate Mike Mullen. That bill really did three main things. The first was it made permanent the prohibition on local government regulations. This is something that the industry has long advocated for, not only in the Commonwealth, but in other states. And the idea, as I mentioned a moment ago, was really to ensure that the Commonwealth has a statewide framework as opposed to a patchwork of regulations that vary jurisdiction to jurisdiction. As I mentioned at the outset of this presentation, both state and local governments are very limited in what they can regulate. And what we have seen throughout the country are local governments that have passed regulations on unmanned systems that deal with them operating in the airspace. And those statutes or ordinances have gone to federal court and ultimately been struck down. And so this moratorium was really looking at ensuring that Virginia didn't find itself in a similar place. The legislation also addressed the issue of trespassing, which is something that the courts committees had looked at for a number of years. I will tell you all, as someone that participated in the negotiations on that specific provision, this was a very delicate balance between the industry and those that were looking to create some sort of classification for aerial trespass. There are a lot of intricacies to that type of restriction or that type of requirement. And so we worked very closely over a number of years to craft language that addressed that issue. And then finally, the bill limits the use of drones by sex offenders or respondents to certain protective orders. All in all, this bill was really seen as a best in the nation type legislation. And as an industry, we were very proud of the work that we did on this bill. That moved us forward to the 2020 session and House Bill 742, which was patroned by Delegate David Bulova. The one piece of the 2018 Omnibus Bill that we found after its implementation was that the preemption language might have restricted local governments a bit much in terms of what they can do with their own property. And so what industry did was coordinate and talk with Delegate Bulova about a bill that would slightly lessen the preemption statute while maintaining the spirit of the language that was adopted in 2018. And the way in which we went about that was requiring that the Department of Aviation prepare a model ordinance which political subdivisions can adopt and do so, obviously, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. The legislation outlined in statute certain exemptions which will have to be built into that proposed ordinance. And those types of things deal with potential onboard technical issue or commercial operation. I will tell you all that right now the Department of Aviation is working on this model ordinance. They've held a number of stakeholder meetings. They have solicited feedback from the industry and others. And those regulations are moving for public comment here shortly. And compliments to Director Flynn and his team for working under some extraordinary circumstances to meet the January 1 deadline to at least provide the draft of those rules and regulations. The other piece of legislation that folks may be familiar about was actually a bill that started out not as an unmanned aircraft system bill, but later became one. And that was Senate Bill 356, which was patroned by Senator John Cosgrove. This bill initially started out looking at the amount of time that an aircraft can be in the Commonwealth before it has to register with the Department of Aviation, specifically fixed wing aircraft. This registry is really focused on having that information for tax purposes, since manned aircraft are obviously a source of revenue. But like most things, our code oftentimes doesn't keep up with evolving technology. And so due to some ambiguity in the definition of an unmanned aircraft system and within the code, the legislation was amended to make clear that unmanned aircraft systems were not subject to this registration. The department does not currently register unmanned aircraft systems, and from my understanding, does not have a desire to do so. But it was really important that we spell that out explicitly in the code. Ultimately, Senate Bill 356 did advance, but due to some last-minute floor amendments, the language regarding the unmanned systems exemption was removed from the bill. But we are looking at addressing that issue and want to thank Delegate Delaney and Senator Favola, who have made who have agreed to patron legislation on that this year and make clear that this registration requirement does not apply to unmanned aircraft systems. Just briefly, where is the industry headed? There are a number of exciting initiatives, and I'll run through these quickly. One is MAP, or Virginia Tech's Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership. This is a program that stemmed from a grant that was stood up by the Federal Aviation Administration, a pilot program that really seeks to identify ways to create a UAS policy framework and understand the interplay between state and local officials when it comes to airspace sovereignty. The other major component of the recent FAA reauthorization was Section 2209. This will be a major game changer for the industry, and this requires the FAA to develop an application process for critical infrastructure. Right now, there's a lot of ambiguity about how to restrict flights over critical infrastructure. Technology platforms such as my clients, DJI, have geofencing technology, and we can actually build into the technology a a geofence around critical infrastructure. But Section 2209 will put that registry online, and that will be built into flight plans moving forward. And then the major initiative that is currently undergoing a rulemaking process, and we're due to see those rules in the next few weeks, is with remote ID. And that will allow law enforcement and federal agencies to identify unmanned aircraft systems in the airspace. And that is obviously a major step forward in being able to identify when someone is using their drone, perhaps how they shouldn't be, and identifying where it is and where the operator is operating the drone from, and being able to address that through law enforcement. And then finally, I mentioned geofencing. As the technology continues to evolve, you can look at certain platforms that allow for geofencing. DJI, for example, has proactively geofenced all of Virginia's correctional facilities. And that's something that the FAA is looking to mandate in the future. And then this slide just gives you a quick example of what geofencing looks like and how it works. But basically, much like other technology platforms, we can really put a zone around a particular facility that will not allow the device to fly in or near those areas. And finally, when we talk about issues for you all, obviously constituent concerns are first and foremost. What we have to understand is the FAA is working aggressively to implement rulemakings as it relates to unmanned aircraft systems. This is a fast evolving technology, and there have been a number of requirements put on the FAA by Congress, and they are working to implement those rulemakings. Obviously, we want to protect Virginia's status for unmanned aircraft systems. The Commonwealth is generally viewed as a favorable state for UAS operations, if not the most favorable state for UAS operations. So as we look at legislation, want to consider how that might impact our rating and status as the top state for unmanned aircraft systems. And then finally, rapid evolving technology. I think we all know that technology evolves much quicker than our code is able to adapt to. And so oftentimes we find ourselves in a bit of catch up, but this is an area that obviously lawmakers, you all will need to grapple with as you consider legislation in future General Assembly sessions. And just briefly, a few helpful resources for you all. One, I would love to point out David Barry's report on the Virginia's legal landscape for unmanned aircraft systems. David did an excellent job at providing a white paper on this. Mark Flynn at the Department of Aviation organizes and manages the SB 307 work group, which is really a group of stakeholders that are tasked at looking at rules and regulations regarding unmanned aircraft systems. And then from an industry perspective, Michelle Satterland of McGuire Woods, Guy Rowling representing Google, Troy Murphy at the NVTC or Northern Virginia Technology Council, and Bud Oakey with the Virginia Aviation Business Alliance. All of us have worked on unmanned aircraft system regulations for years and certainly are very knowledgeable about the status of the industry. So as questions come up, certainly I'm available to answer them, but wanted to provide you with a list of industry representatives who obviously has spent a lot of time in this space. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll wrap up, and obviously I'm available to answer any questions. I tried to run through that quickly to meet y'all's deadline.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate it. And are there any?
Mr. Chairman,
we're a little over time. Just a few quick questions. Senator Serval, is that you?
it is me, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would just like, first of all, ask Mr. Skiles how old he turned today, and congratulate him on his birthday.
Well, thank you, Senator Serval, and Mr. Chairman, Senator Serval. I'm old enough to drink. How about that?
Yeah, he's not old enough to vote. I think it was voter fraud this year. So, at any rate, any other questions for Mr. Skiles? Thank you all. Before we get on to just public comment, we may just have one commenter here, as I'm told. Is there any other business before the committee that anyone would like to bring up? The joint committee, excuse me. Okay, down in the corner, we have Senator DeSteph.
I just wanted to say that thank you guys for the informative presentations. Really appreciate y'all's time the week before Christmas. And thank you again.
Thank you, Senator DeSteph.
Merry
All right,
Christmas.
moving,
Senator DeSteph, I'm not sure if that was convincing, but anyway, especially the week before Christmas.
That's great. At any rate, do we have anybody on for a public comment, staff?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do. Just one. That would be Mr. Robert Bahanan.
All right. Rob, please take it away.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
We got you.
I'd signed up and then I canceled my registration, but clearly that didn't come through in time. So I'm gonna give you your time back.
Oh, all right. Well, there you go. You just moved up tremendously on the lobbyist scorecard.
Yeah.
Just remember that.
15 points.
Yes.
Chairman McQuinn, do you have any other?
Listen, I just want to wish everyone Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday. Be safe and enjoy your time with your intimate family.
Well,
okay, that's it.
And we'll be putting the coal in stockings of anybody who turns in a bad bill this year.
Right.
On either committee.
Exactly.
But happy holidays to all of you. It's great to work with such wonderful people. Thank you so much. And without further ado, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. You all be safe and be blessed. Bye-bye.